So in this video I want to talk about monochrome conversions, and I want to talk specifically about the wrong way to convert a photo into monochrome and better ways of doing it. So what we've got here is an image. It's a color wheel. We've got the three primary colors, red, green and blue, and their complementary colors, cyan, magenta and yellow, and then the analogous colors, which are the ones basically in between. So let's take this over into Photoshop, and we'll have a look and see what this is doing here. So one of the ways that I've seen people create a monochrome image is by going to Image, Adjustments and Desaturate. Now if I desaturate this image, what's going to happen is that all of those colours which have the same amount of saturation will go to the same tone of grey. There we go. All those colours have basically disappeared because when I set this colour wheel up, I made sure that all the saturation on all of those different coloured circles was identical. And this is the problem. If you've got an image where you have lots of content in a photo where the level of saturation for those different elements is the same, they're just going to merge into one another. You lose a lot of the differences in here. And now I'm in a position where I can't do anything. You know, if I then decide, well, let's go and make an adjustment, and we'll do we'll do a I don't know, let's do a brightness and contrast. If we just do brightness, everything brightens up. I can't change anything in here. You know, if I then go and put a black and white adjustment layer on here, not a layer, but do a black and white adjustment, you know, there's no colour here because we've desaturated everything. So desaturating in Photoshop is not a good idea because, as I say, if you've got lots of colours with the same saturation, they just disappear. Let's undo that. Another way that I see get talked about is to go into Image, Mode and Grayscale. So let's have a look at this, see what this one does. So this one says changing modes will discard an adjustment layer, change mode anyway. We're going to say yes, okay to that. And then we get told discard color information, question mark. To control the conversion, use image adjustments black and white. This is actually saying to you at this stage, assuming you haven't checked this little checkbox here, this is saying to you, if you want to create a monochrome or black and white image, don't do it this way. But let's change it. Let's do discard. And what we find is that we get circles of different levels of luminosity. But now if I go into Image Adjustments, you know, I've got lots of things here which are now disabled. So I'm in a position where I can't really control these different elements. So that's not a good way of doing it either. Another way we might do this, and this is what happens inside Lightroom, is if we go to Filter, Camera Raw Filter, so we'll just wait for Camera Raw to come up. Here we go. We have a saturation slider down here in Camera Raw. It's the same slider in Lightroom. If we pull down saturation, look what happens. This is creating a grayscale image. And I've got no black and white. Even if I click on the black and white box here, you know, my color grading now, my black and white mixer, well actually that's still working in here. But you've got to go into Camera Raw to do this. So, you know, this isn't the best way of doing it either. I think we can certainly do better. So, you know, we had a hint when we went to Image, Mode and Grayscale, and it said use a black and white adjustment. So here's a black and white adjustment. And we have sliders in here, you know, for the red, or for all of the 6 primary colours plus their complementary ones. So we can start playing around with some of these colours, and this is a lot better than we had before. Now we can start pushing these around and getting a better idea, or not better idea, but a better monochrome adjustment. And what this is actually doing is this is adjusting the luminosity of the colours in this image. So this is a better adjustment. But I think we can do better. Let's cancel this. One way we can do better is, because the black and white adjustment layer is adjusting the luminosity, well, we have another adjustment in here that adjusts luminosity. In fact, we have several adjustments, but the one I really want to look at here is hue and saturation. This allows us to go into any of these 6 channels, these 6 colours. We can adjust the hue, we can adjust saturation, and we can just adjust lightness. So I'm on the reds here, so we can move the red channel around and really start to put this into a different colour. We can push, desaturate it, we can adjust the lightness. So I've just done reds here. So now when I go into image adjustments, black and white, I've got a different adjustment here. And I can then, as I adjust the luminosity in the black and white layer, because I've already made changes, I'm now limiting what this does. Or limiting is maybe the wrong word, but I have more control over how the red colours are going to appear in my monochrome image. And the other thing that I can do with this is I can apply a tint. So here we've got a yellowish tint here, which has made my image look a bit sepia. And we can adjust the hue of this around as well, and the saturation, so we can do some really quite interesting effects with it if we wanted to. But there's a problem with doing it using image adjustments. Let me duplicate this layer. If I then go into image adjustments, hue and saturation, and we can then start making changes to this. In fact, there's a couple of problems. I will show you what those problems are. Let's move the hue of the reds up to a different hue, and then we can adjust the lightness and the saturation. And we can then go, actually this is a good point. I clicked on OK there accidentally. Let's go back into my image adjustments, hue and saturation, and go back into my reds. My changes have gone. They're not there. So let's undo that change. Let's make this a smart object. Here's a smart object. We go into image adjustments, hue and saturation. Again, we can make my red channel changes. And then we'll do lightness. We'll click on OK. And now we've got a smart filter. We can then double click on hue and saturation again. Now it keeps my reds, but we can go back into the yellows. Now, and we can make changes in the yellows on the saturation and the lightness and the hue. And we've now got the changes we've got in here. But if I forget to do this, and instead I go to image adjustments, hue and saturation, what I actually get is a second smart adjustment in here. And I'm not accessing what I had previously, so the reds and the yellows aren't showing any changes, and that's because they're on a different adjustment. So I clicked on OK. But the other problem is, let's check out the file size. The file size has gone to 252 megabytes in size. So if we then duplicate this layer, and I then go into image adjustments, black and white, and then we can start moving the these sliders around for the black and white. So now we've got this. Now I've got a problem, because I've now got a filter for hue and saturation. I've got my smart filter for black and white. My file size is going up all the time, and this is an unnecessary step you just don't need to go through, because we have adjustment layers in here which are doing exactly what we need to do here. Plus, you can do these things interactively. I've just double clicked on hue and saturation, and tells me in here, smart filters stacked on top of this filter will not preview while this filter is being edited, and they'll be applied after committing the filter parameters dialog. Well, I don't know if I adjust my greens this time, for example. I don't know what I want to do with the greens. I don't know how this is going to come out in black and white. I've no idea. I've got no way of predicting this. And it only becomes apparent after I click on OK that may or may not be what I want. I might want that darker. I would like it darker. So I have to click on my hue and saturation again, go back into my greens, and I have to start playing around with my saturation, trying to find something where this is going to end up darker. Maybe I need to take it to the blues. I don't know. I can't tell from here. So, we're playing around with smart filters. We're adding to the file size, and it's all really rather messy. A much better way of doing all of this actually is not to use image adjustments at all, but to use adjustment layers. So let's go and add a hue and saturation layer, and then on the top of this we will go in and we'll add a black and white adjustment. Now I can start playing around with my hue and saturation, and I can see what's going on interactively. As I change the hue on the master channel, everything changes. If we go to the reds and we start changing the hue, I can see in front of me exactly how that's going to look in my image. I can go back to the black and white, and I can make adjustments in here to adjust the tonality, or to adjust the luminosity of the reds. Maybe we want to adjust the yellows as well. Let's go back to the hue and saturation, and we go back to the reds. My previous changes are still there. My file size has hardly grown at all. So let's just play around with the saturation, see where this takes us. And I'm just playing around with the three sliders, which I get to manipulate with hue and saturation. It's an HSL layer, hue, saturation and lightness. And that allows me to interactively see what is going on with the black and white adjustment layer, which I do not get if I use image and adjustments. Even if I create it as a smart object, I don't get this interactive nature of actually being able to see in front of me how things are changing. Let's go back to my hue and saturation, and let's choose the green channel. And we can start playing around with the greens, and let's see how this works. We can we can start playing around with this, and we can see interactively how it's going to change with the interaction between hue and saturation and black and white. But we can go a step further. Let's put a gradient map. Now there seems to be a bug in the current version of Photoshop, because this is supposed to be pure black and white, and it's definitely got a green tint to it. But I think that's a bug in Photoshop. If we look inside the gradient in here, in the midtones, there's a greenish tinge, and it doesn't matter what I do with my colours here, that greenish tint is there. I think this is an issue with Photoshop that Adobe will have to fix. But while we're in here, we can do other things. So let's go back onto that black part. So what we've got here is a gradient. And the gradient map is not doing like a gradient filter does on a camera. What this is saying is, okay, in this image, make all the dark tones whatever colour this left hand side is, and make all the light tones whatever colour the right hand side is, and then just graduate it throughout the remaining tones. And we can adjust where that midpoint is. So we've got quite a lot of flexibility. I'll show you more of that when we start to change the colours. And we can do that. We can change the colour. So at the moment it's black, and we can change this to say a dark blue. And I can change the white to a pale yellow colour. And so now we've got a monochrome image still, but it's going from this dark blue to this pale yellow. And as I move my my midtones around, different parts of this image will change colour. And we're going to see this more when we do a proper photo. So that's the theory. So let's do a proper image. Let's close this out. And here's an image. This is Paddington Station. So let's delete all of these layers. I don't want all of these duplicated layers. They're not adding anything to the image. So here's my colour image, and I'm going to put my hue and saturation layer on here and my black and white layer. If we click on my hue and saturation, and then I click on this little hand tool, I can click on these different areas and it will pick up a different colour. So this has picked up the yellows, and we can start swiping from side to side and adjust saturation. But we can also go into here and start moving around the hue of those tiles. We can go onto the black and white adjustment layer, and we can start playing around with hues in here, or not hues, but the lightness in here. Let's see, there we go, it's the red channel that we've got. So we can push the red channel in the black and white adjustment layer to start showing up more of these tiles. Let's go back into the hue and saturation, and we'll pick a different tile this time. So this is in the blues, and again we can shift the blues around, and we can move the lightness and the saturation. Let's go back up here into the blues. I don't know what colour that is. Let's have a look. It's okay, kind of a greyish colour. Well, I don't know what colour it is. Let's click on the little hand tool in the black and white adjustment layer and see what it's doing. So this is saying it's still in the blue channel. And we can start moving these things around, and we can do this interactively. And maybe we'll do the cyans as well. And so by doing it like this, we can get a much more dynamic change to a black and white adjustment. And of course we've got masks and all of these things, so there's things going on here with the signage and the clocks where those are changed, and I can do those separately just by simply masking those areas out and putting a different hue and saturation layer on here. So if you're going to create a black and white photo inside Photoshop, this gives you a much better way of controlling all of the different colours. But of course it's not the only way to do it. Let's get rid of these two layers. Another way we can do this is if we create this as a smart object, we can go into filter, camera raw filter, and of course we can do this inside Lightroom as well. And we have a load of presets in here. Where are my presets? Here we go. And some of the presets that come with Adobe Camera Raw and Lightroom, we've got some black and white ones. And so I'm just holding my mouse. I'm not clicking on anything. I'm just moving my mouse up and down. And we can see in here that it's giving us a better black and white image than just desaturating it. What is this actually doing? Well, let's click on black and white landscape. And we'll go back, we'll come out of my presets and back into the basic panel. And what this is doing, this is making some changes inside the basic panel, the sliders in here. But it's also changing the profile to B&W04. What's a profile? Okay, so there's a difference between profiles and presets. Every image created must have a profile. Right, it's not an optional thing, it must have it. But not every image needs to have any of these sliders changed. So let's go back a couple to the original image, and let's suppose that what I do is I just do auto and it's moving sliders. Okay, it's made some changes to the image, it's boosted the colors, it's boosted saturation, it's up, opened up the shadows, opened up the whites, pulled down the blacks. It's made some changes. If we then go back to the presets and I go back down to my black and white and we click on landscape again and we'll say OK to that. Oop, didn't mean to apply that. Let's go back into my camera raw filter. It's a good job I made it I don't want to go into that one. I wanted to double click on here. Let's go back into the camera raw filter and let's see what it's done. So we made all those changes, but clicking on the preset will wipe these sliders out. It'll move them around. So let's reset this image. How do I reset it? I forget. Down here, there we go. Oh, I'll tell you what, let's get rid of this. I'll go back into here again. So we've undone those changes. Let's go back into the camera raw filter. This is what I should have done. And again, we will now click on auto. And remember, it chose black and white 04 as the profile. Well, we see we've got this little icon, this little button here. If I click on that button, we can browse these profiles. And we might then be able to say, well, the preset uses black and white 04. Is that the better profile? Maybe I prefer black and white 06 or 03, or 03 actually isn't bad. Or maybe I prefer one of the color filters down here. The green filter looks quite good. Or the red filter. Let's just use the red filter. Oh, I've done it again. Let's go back into here. And this time it hasn't changed any of these sliders at all. So, I might have spent some time, several minutes, adjusting these sliders to get them how I want, adjusting these values to get the tonality of my image how I want, and then I can just put a black and white profile over the top. So the difference between presets and profiles is that a preset is a starting point. A profile just adds a tone over the top of the image. And we can then go down to what was HSL and is now a black and white mixer, and we can start playing around and fine-tuning some of these colours on top of what we had before. And you wouldn't have set some of these colours the way I'm going to set these previously, because you wouldn't have known that this is how you want them set. And we can actually go back. Let's go back to this filter. Because maybe after making those changes I don't like that effect. Let's look at something else. Maybe black and white 06 is the one that I want. And we can collapse that up, click on back. And so we can do more work, and so we can do this quite interactively. And this will give us a much, much better black and white image than just going into image adjustments, desaturate. I hope you find this useful. If you do have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to get back in touch with me. Okay, thank you very much.